Hi, friends. I'm a storytelling photographer, educator, and speaker based in Canmore, Alberta. For me, photography has been a major part of my own personal mental health and healing journey, particularly when it comes to my son's medical story. I was there too as a series of conversations where I talk with people like Judy Dahl. Judy is a child life specialist who is involved in my son's most recent heart surgery at the Stollery Children's Hospital in Edmonton. Judy, tell us about yourself and your job.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I'm absolutely honored. And I've had the honor and privilege of working at the Stollery Children's Hospital for going on 34 years as a child life specialist. The roles evolved and changed over time, but our primary focus has always remained the same, and that is to minimize stress for children and families, enhance their self-esteem even when it's a very difficult experience, and to provide normalization for kids and families, whatever that means for that particular child and family. So that goes from the range of providing normalized play experiences to providing preparation to procedures and surgery so they can create a sense of mastery over what they're going to experience and also become participants in their own care. It also means providing and with families, developing coping plans and coping strategies that work for them, always encompassing the child no matter how old they are, to be part of that planning process. And a big part of what we do, which sometimes is we don't talk a lot about and really fits into what Kristy talks about, is memory creation. Because even when we have very difficult situations, it's part of the reframing for kids and families, and even for us as staff, so that we know that even in the most difficult circumstances, when there is a memory attached that is positive, we can reframe that, and kids can have strength and growth experiences and actually gain self-esteem and gain resilience because of their very difficult experience. It is the absolute greatest joy of my life, is a big part of my career. So I'm so honored and blessed to be part of, again, in 34 years, being the part of so many thousands of people's memories of very difficult situations. I take that very seriously, is that I am part of their memory. I am part of their journey. So how can we create that to be as positive as possible? So it's been remarkable.
So you were talking and I was like, you hadn't said the word resilient yet, but I was like, yes, yes, resilient. Like that is exactly what I think about it. Just, I'm going to explain a little bit of our experience. I know Judy through Cardiac Family Advisory Care Team. So I knew her before we needed her, which actually Judy and I were talking about this a little bit before we started recording, that lots of families don't know about child life, or they haven't been introduced to them, or they like just get a good feeling about child life, but they don't have the background knowledge. And child life is one of the things that I think is the most important thing that we can do for families and kids in hospital. My son had a heart surgery in September. He's had a heart surgery before. My husband and I kind of knew, like, we knew what to expect, but we also had another kiddo. So now we have a kid who's old enough to know what's going on, and a younger brother who's never been through any of this, and really parents who are traumatized from medical stuff. So can always use a little more support. And Judy sent me resources ahead of time. She met both of my kids at the hospital to kind of do a run through of some medical play and some terminology and just getting a chance to be in the hospital prior to Kane's surgery, and then continued to support us throughout his surgery and his recovery. So amazing experience. I can't tell you enough positive things about child life, like funnel money there and the doctors and the nurses. Well, there's a lot of important people, but I think the mental health side of it, child life plays a really key role. Now, Judy was actually in the photographs, so she let me take pictures when she was working with my two boys. And she was also in some of the photographs around our heart surgery. And I just want to talk to you first about what that was like. Being in photos, especially in a hospital, because that's often not the way things are done. What was that like for you?
To be honest with you, it didn't change any part of what I do with kids, because again, because of the longevity of my career, have had kids and families come back 20, 30 years past, and they remember what I wore at certain points of their journey. They remember how my hair was, less gray, but they remember that. And they remember how I smell, different aspects of it. So to have it documented in photos, it's already happened in their memory. So it's actually years before we had the technology, and before more and more parents are using their phones to take pictures very informally, which is great. But even before that, we would do videography, and we'd have those big video cameras so that we could mark memories for families. So it wasn't just a memory in their brain, which is great, but that the concrete, tangible piece is part of the coping strategy for the child and family, because as that child grows older and they face other challenges possibly in their world, they can go back to that concrete, tangible picture and see what actually happened. And again, build resilience and build strength from getting through that difficult part. So for us in our role, it's a very natural process, to be honest. I'm not sure that all medical staff would feel that way, but it is absolutely part of the therapeutic component and part of the interventions that we would encourage. So we would encourage that to happen for sure more and more, to be honest.
I love that you were okay with it, because I'm never sure how medical personnel are going to react. I always talk to them. I don't take pictures unless people have given me permission, but it's not the easiest thing. And I never want to take advantage of somebody when I'm in hospital and say, hey, I'm going to take pictures. If anybody's uncomfortable, I don't do it.
It's that therapeutic component for the child and family, though. Like, that's the focus. Like, for us, it's absolutely, because we know that will be a tool that you as a parent can use. Like, when, for example, if some girl breaks her son's heart one day, you can go back to him and say, look at how old you were here, and look at what you went through. You're going to get through this. You'll have a picture, even if he forgot about it. You'll have a time. Like, it can be utilized in so many ways.
Yeah. And I think that idea of giving cameras to kids, because Kane does take pictures with us. So in the case where I'm thinking of, where Judy was in a lot of our pictures, we had a photographer with us, because I need to see myself in our story too. I'm the mom, I'm the caregiver, I'm the medical family photographer, but I was missing me in the story. And so when I look back at the pictures, yes, they're for Kane, absolutely, though we don't show him a ton of the really intense pictures, but they're also for me. Like, our whole family has done this, and our whole family are heart warriors. And so getting that camera in his hands and being able to talk about photos with that is a huge part of it. And I would love to see that happen more for kids in hospital, to have cameras accessible to them.
And you know what, Kristy, you had mentioned that even before, I believe, you at a cardiac fact meeting. So part of our prep for kids, and we're going to be doing that, is just tricky to get all these permissions in COVID. But as kids, we're going to have a few kids holding cameras from their viewpoint on their beds. Like we prepare them for example, CT scans or MRIs, and we have all the pictures, but we don't have the picture from that child's viewpoint, because that really opened our eyes. It's like, well, what we're showing kids what we see, but we're not showing kids what kids see.
It was mind blowing. The first time Kane brought a camera to the Stollery, it was during a cardiology appointment, and we had like an echo and an ECG. And like, the pictures that he took were like the etched birds on the ceiling that I had never noticed. And he is like, oh yeah, like just telling me totally different things. So not only is it a distraction, because I think that is a really important piece of it, but also you do just get to start talking about things that you wouldn't have noticed. And it is a talking point for a lot of the things that come up. Kane very badly wants to write a book about going to the hospital, and he's like planned out the pictures that he wants to include. He's got to keep working on the writing part of the whole thing. How have other parents documenting their journey, how can they approach medical staff about taking pictures? Because again, you've said that you're quite comfortable with it and in your role, but what do you think, even with child life, not everybody is comfortable having pictures taken? How do you suggest parents go about doing that if they want to be telling their story or have their kids tell their story?
No, I think just that honest piece is, we're marking our journey, and we want our child to have the concrete hands-on evidence, I guess, of what they've been through. And to be, again, because everybody has a phone, more and more people are asking, and probably I would say 85 to 90% of staff are very comfortable. Sometimes during the middle of a procedure, because they want, the physician or nurse may want to be focused on that actual part. If they may ask that you videotape or take pictures, maybe not of the actual, maybe if they're putting a central line in, for example, but maybe of a different section of it. So they may have some direction around that. But more and more, I think just being very honest about it and just saying you're documenting your journey. And I think more and more staff are just feeling very honored to be part of these families' journeys. We've done a little bit of education from our side on that, because it was a hard no for many years, way
For
past.
a long time. Yeah.
And we've done a lot of work with staff very indirectly and through modeling, because a lot of times in a hospital culture, things have to happen more so via modeling. And now even with, in the late 80s, we had what was called family-centered care, but then we had a lot of budget cuts, and then now it's been revived, thankfully. But having all those kinds of committees has really helped the medical team see how valuable it is too. So that's been a very, very aiding in this process too.
Oh, good. I'm so glad. Um, what are your thoughts on having other like families bring other photographers in?
Yeah, that can be a little bit of a challenge just because of privacy and confidentiality, but it works. It worked for you. And there's no reason why we can't past COVID, obviously,
Yeah.
once we're past COVID. But why, we've had different groups, like I believe, Kristy, you did it with Ronald McDonald House, even. We've had it happen many, many times. How we've gotten a little bit beyond that right now is one of our child life staff has an interest. She's not a professional photographer, but she brings in her camera and does special pictures too, because we don't always have access to the hospital photographer. And in the moment of time, we need to capture it immediately. And I always say professional photographers are different, because like when I'm taking a picture, I'm waiting for, I'm just kind of just setting up the moment, where a real photographer captures the moment.
Yeah. Yeah,
Right.
that makes sense. I've been working with a family here in the Bow Valley who has a daughter who has Rett syndrome, and we have gone and it's kind of a multifaceted. Like we're thinking about therapies, we're thinking about clinic visits, we're thinking about home life, and so we've documented lots of different things, and it's just really cool to see how mom uses those photos to talk to other people about her daughter. And also putting them into social stories. So medical play. So we've done quite a bit of medical play stuff where they're getting ready for an EEG or an ECG, and they are using a doll and the wires, and we're taking pictures. So then those pictures go right onto, because she's nonverbal, go right onto her iPad for her touch chat, and they can do the social story, but they also then have pictures to show what that is like. And she's had some of that experience. So I'm starting to see families who know a lot about child life taking those things that child life has taught them and putting it into their own life and supporting their kids in that way. And I think that is amazing.
And that is our goal, is always to create that independence, so that you create your own coping strategies and your own interventions. You don't need us there. It's because our goals all, yes, we have a lot of education behind us, but families can adapt and adjust. I mean, look at all our parents who've become teachers at home, right? The goal is always to create an independence and create those, so that they can create their advance their skills, that they can do it on their own. Like so many kids can do imagery and relaxation because they've learned those skills to be able to do them without a coach now. And that's always our goal, is so that so that parents can prep their kids at home, so that parents can do, how much blood work do your kids need? A lot. So then we teach the skills, and then the parents can overtake that, or the kids can do it on their own as well.
Mhm.
I also want to mention, you had talked about the social stories, and that is, we've had through the patient family centered care has really done a lot of work around that. And when staff, especially in the ICUs, who only work with the kids in the ICU, see those social stories and see the kids doing well in their home environments, it is exceptionally rewarding and motivating for those staff.
Yep.
So it goes both ways, to be honest, to have these tools for families to grow, but it helps staff grow as well. I'm very lucky because I follow the cardiac kids throughout their entire journey, so I get to see that healing. But a lot of the ICU staff don't get to see that. They only see that very critical phase and nothing else.
That's a really good point. Oh, I didn't think about that.
So when
Tell us
you see that, it's great.
Tell us how, like, because we were talking again before we started about just what things are like right now. Do you want to tell people a little bit about what the hospital, because it is very different. And it's the reason I can't go and photograph families in hospital, obviously, very low on the priority list, but it is how I've started talking more about telling your own story, because I think there, with isolation from families, if you're in hospital, but also from all of the people that are connected to your story, you almost have to do more of a job of sharing that information clearly with your extended family, the people that are important to you, and finding ways to do that is how I've used photography. So I'm just wondering if you can explain how things are looking right now in hospitals.
As I mentioned, it's been a really difficult year with COVID, and our focus is always patient and family centered care, and that connectivity and keeping family units together as much as possible. So of course we've used all the, FaceTiming and virtual kinds of visits and those aspects. However, developmentally, certain age groups, that can actually over time does harm. And there's a lot of anger and resentment. And they actually, our younger kids will push the iPads away, push them away. We've had kids do outside visits like through the glass. That can actually be harmful as well for certain age groups because they want that concrete touching. And there's been, cries, different aspects. So we're really trying to guide a little bit with our expertise in those situations and setting those up. But it goes from obviously the missing and loss of sibling connections, grandparent connections, which are difficult for the kids, but also the parents. And that can be really, really difficult. So we of course, we take pictures, we send pictures again. What makes it a little bit more concrete is when we take the pictures, we laminate them, we get pictures from families, we laminate them so that the kids can actually hold on to the pictures at least. So it's not just a screen, there's actual that touch piece. We're also doing sibling boxes. It's a program funded by the foundation that we put a proposal in. So then kids can, it's not just the box. So we have like different toys, different things that their siblings might be interested or love. Like, what's your sibling's favorite thing? If it's frozen, the kids can pick from a variety of toys, and we make a box and we send it through mail so they can then have concrete. And then the parents or whoever is at home will videotape them opening the box so the sibling in hospital can see them opening the box and they can keep replaying it. So sometimes we'll even do very concrete things like a handprint of a sibling. The other child will do a handprint, then we send them back and forth, and then they each have their hands that are very concrete. So it's very personalized, and each box is very different and unique depending on the child and the family and what they choose. And we actually started doing this before COVID because so many of our cardiac families come from the province. And what we were finding was that sure, a lot of kids can come, but kids that are school age or different things, the families just couldn't always uproot them. So we're finding ways to keep them more connected in a much more concrete way. So those are some of the things that we're trying to do.
And when we were in hospital, one of the things that I had trouble with was, do we bring Maverick into the ICU? Maverick's Kane's younger brother. Do we bring him in to see Kane when things are like a little scarier? And you had really good advice. Just start with a picture, send him a picture, then do a video, talk to them and see if they want to do it. And I do find like that kind of box idea, the sibling box idea that you're talking about, takes the scary out of it a little bit too, right? Like when Maverick did come to the hospital, he's like staring at Kane and overwhelmed by that. And they're not having an interaction like they normally would. Whereas a box like that allows like some interaction in a different way. That's a wonderful idea. I'm so glad.
If it wasn't COVID, sometimes we'll have those kids give their sibling that box so then they can play with those toys together so that connection can be made.
Yeah.
So we're trying to, it's a really sad time because those are parts of, again, building resilience and building that team. Like you guys have your team, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have a name for your team. And it's really hard to do when kids have been in since pre-COVID and they haven't been able to visit with their siblings for different medical reasons. We can't take them outside. Obviously, the siblings can't come inside. Parents had to choose which kids they would spend time with at Christmas. It's a very difficult time. There's a lot of, like I said, a lot of collateral consequences to COVID that have impacted our chronic and long-term kids in the hospital.
Yeah.
It's devastating, to be honest with you, at times.
Yeah.
We haven't been able to some of the medical procedures that I won't go into it because confidentiality that we would be able to do. So yes, it's even impacted medical resources for kids, obviously, too. Yeah. We've combined, which is in the news, we've combined all our ICUs into one right now.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
So we have PICU, NICU, and PCICU all in the 6th floor.
Okay. Just to remove them. Okay.
Yeah. And that's so that we could open up ICU beds for the adult world. Mm-hmm. So that means parents can't sleep there. That means one parent at a time at bedside.
Yeah. And I think back to like our NICU experience as well, which you weren't involved with, but there's another child life specialist there. And she did have like a little photo printer. And this is 8 years ago. Like, but there was talk about like printing pictures and they had like a little scrapbooking section. And I think those kind of things, especially if you're in a hospital for a long time, printing up those pictures and actually using them and doing things with them is another piece of the whole creativity and healing journey. So yeah, even little things like that, printing a couple pictures you already have. It doesn't have to be about medical experiences, but it could be spending some time making a collage of people you love and taking a picture and sending it to them, right?
For a while, we families weren't even allowed to bring food in from the outside.
Yeah.
For a while, it was one parent, which meant no dad or pick a mom or a dad. Like that obviously didn't work for very long because it was so traumatic. So you're just trying to find all that balance between that piece. But yeah, and again, because of technology, back in the day, we would use the Polaroid pictures. So there was that tangible piece. Then we went so far away from that because everybody had a camera. Now it's like, no, we need actual pictures to hold.
Yeah. I absolutely agree with that. Kate, so what are things looking like going forward? What's next for you? What's next for child life? Actually, before we do though, will you please tell people, because I know people have talked to me when they hear about child life and they hear stories about it, they wonder how they could be a child life specialist or like what the education is like. Will you talk about that before we go on?
Sure. So the education has changed over time, and there's not really like a child life degree where everybody goes and like someone would become a nurse, because there's just not that many jobs. You're not going to, if you graduate a class of 80 people, well, that's not going to be feasible because there won't be enough jobs. So there are many ways to go about it. The best way is to look out under the Association for Child Life Professionals, or even if you Google Child Life Council, and that gives you the whole way to go about becoming a child life specialist. But it is a degree. You need a degree, but now like they are really focusing on masters, but it's not required yet. But it is quite a process from the time I did it in the 80s, obviously, where, you know, if you have a Bachelor of Arts with a focus on psychology, you could have a education degree, but then you also have to take a many additional courses on child life, on child development, on grief and loss. So it's more than a 4-year degree because you have to do all those extra courses. And then you have to do internships, which you have to do a minimum of 2. And then you have to write a certification exam, and you have to keep all your like PDAs and all your professional development hours and all those kinds of things that you need to keep up your professional accreditation. So it is quite a process.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I didn't know most of that, so I appreciate that as well. And then, yeah, so what's next? What do you see happening? I don't know.
Um, well, I think, you know, some of the good things that have come from the pandemic is that really reminding of going back to some of the basics. Like, of course, like the work that we do for procedures and the clinical pieces that we do is really important, but that piece of patient and family centered care, the piece of having our group programs that we are not able to run
Mhm.
for so long, and how that loss of socialization for kids, that we really need to go back and look at our therapeutic interventions that we are providing in group programs. So we're going to focus a lot on that. We also have a huge funding project that the foundation has done, and commitment, and the radiothon was a big part of that. That we are redoing the beach program. We're going to have outside spaces for kids and families, and really expanding that social piece and places where families can be together. So that is a good thing that has come from the pandemic,
Yeah.
for
Well,
sure. Like,
and the Stollery Radiothon raised 1.7 million,
I
which is
know, I couldn't believe it after.
during COVID, like take it. And I know the Wolfpack Warriors, one of the things that we focused on, we donated to the hospital as well for family and patient-centered care specifically, because that is just from our lived experience, such an important part. And so that idea that the beach is like a play area. Kane's used it a couple times, but we often aren't inpatient for long enough, or he's in the ICU, and that's not an option. But I know how many families depend on the beach and those group programs, and I think I can't
That's
wait.
a big part of that memory creation that we always talk about. And that's a part that we've had much more difficulty with because we don't have those programs running. So it's, again, we're going to really refocus and really re-examine how we're doing that, how we can do it better. Because when we have kids who, when they're finally ready to go home, I don't want to go home, I want to go to the beach. Like, we want that. Or we want them to, you know, we have so many kids coming to the clinic. Well, I can't wait to go see, you know, the whoever's working on the beach, because it's not just the space, it's the relationships that are built with the child life staff. I want to see that person. I want to do that part of it. So really, really re-examining and really putting a focus on how we can even do that better.
That makes sense. Well, Judy, it was a pleasure to talk with you
Thank you
again.
so much for having me. I could talk about it for days, as you can tell.
I love it.